Well, we're back again. Seems like it's been a long time since I've been able to see you face to face, but I thank the Lord for the medium that we do have to communicate, to let the gospel be preached and lay it out before you. I am not doing our normal Sunday school lesson this time, which is coming out of the book of Hebrews chapter 11. I wanted to save that for the time that we could be there together, ask questions, talk about each one of those individuals that were so prevalent in the role of faith, that they would be included in what is very much considered a hall of fame when it came down to having faith in the one who provides all the faith. So today, I would like to spend a little bit of time talking about things that are different because we don't see a lot of it. As each one of you know, that we are inundated with this COVID-19, this coronavirus that has overtaken our land right at the moment and really has overtaken a lot of our public communications, to the point that you really don't get to see anything new and anything fresh outside of people talking about this. And of course, each one arguing, wanting to say they're right, no, he's right, no, I can't believe they couldn't do this, I can't believe that somebody doesn't have the answer, why haven't they invented this, why don't we get more testing, why do these things? But I've noticed this. Most of those that are making the statements are not in charge. They're the ones that we call armchair quarterbacks that sit back and take cheap shots, literally, at the people that have to make the decisions. Whether that decision is coming from a mayor of a city or, say, from a governor of a state, or ultimately coming out from the guidance that is given unto the President of the United States. It's easy to second guess. It's easy to say, I would have done it this way. But the reality of it is, not very many people sit in that big chair. And not many people have the ability to make a decision based upon the knowledge given, especially when that knowledge is very suspect. When we're not being given all the facts, because we don't know the facts yet. We don't know all the things that are given. You say, why am I just coming to this? Well, I think you get to a point that you're tired of listening. You're tired of listening to the criticism that comes out, that no one is right. And when one happens to be, say, from a different political persuasion, and they would compliment, say, in this regard, I heard this week about a young lady that happened to be a representative in our Congress complimenting the president on what he had done. Now she's being censored by her own party for complimenting our president. The last I looked, he was the president of the United States. He wasn't just the president of a few people or one party, but all of us. Like him or not like him, and understand him or you don't understand him. The point is, who are we to make the questions? Who are we to decide what is going to be done? In the Word of God today, there are many times that God has made decisions. Decisions that to man we have no clue about. We don't know what to say about them. We say, well, if I was in charge, and thank the Lord you were not in charge and I was not in charge. Because God's perfect knowledge, His sovereign guidance over our lives always does what is best for us. In spite of the fact of our lack of intelligence when it comes down to it, He always does what is best. He foresees things that you and I could never foresee. Oh, we think we have an insight to a certain subject, only to find out that God doesn't have just an insight. He is the subject. He knows it. He wrote it. He is that one. And today I want to pick up the Son of God. I want to talk about something that took place now that we have gone through the Easter season together in this regard. I want to look at something that took place prior to Jesus giving Himself as a sacrificial lamb on the cross and the results of that. So I'm going to pick up today out of the Gospel of John. We're going to go to John chapter 13. I'll give you a moment to get there. John chapter 13, and I'll begin reading at verse number 12. But I hope you have God's Word with you today and that you can follow along with me in that Word. Whether I will be using the King James as I do all the time. But there are so many applications today that this translates to very, very modern language. But a couple of terms I will be using today may seem archaic because our society just doesn't practice it. All right? So, John's Gospel, 13th chapter. I'm going to begin reading at verse number 12. The Word of God says, "So after he had washed their feet and had taken his garments and sat down again, he said unto them, Know ye not what I have done to you?" Posing a question to his disciples. All seated around him. "Know ye not what I have done to you? You call me Master and Lord, and ye say, Well, for so I am. If I then, your Lord and Master, have washed your feet, ye also ought to wash one another's feet. For I have given you an example, that ye should do as I have done to you. Verily, verily, I say unto you, the servant is not greater than his Lord, neither he that sent greater than he that sent him. If ye know these things, happy are ye if you do them." I always love the way that Jesus laid things out for us. He made it very clear. It wasn't hard to understand what he was talking about. It's not hard to understand anything that comes down to serving people today. But there's a term that in so many ways is a use that we don't normally bring it out anymore. It's called humility. And today I want to talk about humility. I want to talk about humility because we live in a society that humility is not presented very well. It's not something that people beat each other out to try to do, to show themselves or to live a humble life. And I think this text speaks very clearly to that. In verse number 12, he makes it very clear. He says, "So after he had washed their feet," the event had taken place. What he was going to do, well, it was done. After he washed their feet and had taken his garments and was set down again, he said unto them, "Know you not what I have done to you?" Now that doesn't seem like a difficult question, but it has a lot of ramifications that may not meet the eye right off the bat. When he says, "Do you know what I've done to you?" Many of them could simply say, "Well, you washed our feet." I want to take you to the place this was done. It was done in the upper room as they were preparing for the very last moments of Jesus' life. Soon he would be in Gethsemane. Soon he'd be before Pilate. Soon he would be taken and placed before Herod. All of these things were going to take place. Then the cross would come. Then the resurrection. And then the joy of Easter. But this is the last Passover. This is the celebration. And they were there together in this upper room. An upper room that many of you seen the pictures, and we picture all of the disciples there, one leaning in on Jesus, always paying attention, seeing what's going on. So it was a very solemn moment, if you even were as a Jew, because it's the Passover. But even more solemn because Jesus is speaking to his disciples. He has displaced the Paschal Lamb. He has become the offering himself. He is doing the things that only he could do. And in the breaking of the bread, he makes the statement, "This is my body." They would not know the significance of that statement. You and I do today if we spend any time in the Word at all, if we know anything about the cross. And this was in the shadow of that very cross, an event that would take place soon. He's saying, "This is my body." Just like this bread, it's going to be broken for you. it's going to be given for you. It's going to satisfy all of those that have the answer, but none of them that were seated at the right place. They didn't know what God was doing. They didn't know what God was up to. All they knew was what they wanted and what they were going to do. So, think about the ones that he was speaking to. Jesus has said to them in the 12th verses, "Know ye not what I have done to you?" Well, these are disciples. They've spent 3 years together. They followed Jesus. They watched him all of this time. And the thing that has always been constant is Jesus. His love, his grace, how he dealt with people, how he treated those that were not of high in society at all, or how he treated those that were. Always the same between each one of them. What were the disciples like? Well, at this particular time in the upper room, they were literally backbiting each other. They were spending the time telling how great they were individually and why they should be at the head of the class and doing all the things. They were arguing among themselves, making the statement, who is the greatest? Not realizing, I guess, or had lost sight of it, that one had just said, you are truly the Son of God. Yes, you are truly the very one. You are the Messiah. But yet the same person and others that were in that inner circle that he had that was within the 12 were demanding, I want to be the chairman. I want to be the CEO. I need to be the head of this. I want to be in charge of this. I want to do this. Because Jesus may say, when I enter into my kingdom, you'll be there with me. And so they all wanted a position of fame. They all wanted to be remembered and recognized as something great. They were standing and contending for their own rights. Is that not our society today? Our society that's demanding from everybody, you owe me something, or you need to give me something. We're just coming out of the stimulus package, as we call it, where many people are receiving money just a regular salary, but they're still being given something else. They're demanding, I need more money. I need this. But do we ever stop to realize, where's it coming from? And who will be repaying that amount? Well, look at us. We pay taxes. We'll be doing that very thing. But let me get back to the story, though. This was a secret meeting. In other words, this was a meeting that no servants were going to be. They were not going to be there to wait tables. They were not going to be to do the normal things that servants do. And so there we find that, which was very common, was that everybody would have their feet washed. That was a very common thing. This is the Passover. This is what it is. You know, now, James and John, the brothers, well, they could have volunteered, but it was a menial task. It was a task that, I guess if I took my shoes off, I don't think anybody would want to wash my feet either. And, you know, I've seen a few of you, and I feel the same way about your feet, too. But James and John, sons of thunder, very much the inner circle, all that they were interested in, I don't want to be a servant. I don't want to be someone that washes feet. I want to be number one and number two. I want to sit at the right hand and I want to sit at the left hand when you come into your kingdom, Lord. These are the things we want to be. But it took this one that was the servant of all to take on this responsibility. Then you look for someone that we all will recognize because he plays a great role in the Easter project. All the things that took place from the very time of the crucifixion, or before the crucifixion, from Gethsemane on. Simon Peter. We all know Simon Peter. We would all be the first ones probably to say, well, I would never do that. But we weren't there either. We were never asked to do that. Here's Simon Peter, the natural leader, the one that always had something to say. He always had a position to take. And he was just like the rest of the men at that point. He was too busy asserting himself, his rights. He was standing on his own dignity. I will never forsake you. And though all will leave you, I'm going to be right there with you. Lord, you don't have to worry about this. This is what I'm going to do. And he had great intentions, as do many people today when they're offering their opinion. But when it comes right down to it, he failed. He failed at that very critical moment, as will so many today in our society. When it really comes down to it, there's one chosen to do that job, and they will end up doing the job, while everybody else stands back and criticizes. Where did that bring me to? It brings me to the one who is always a servant, who came to us, not that we would serve him, that he would serve us. And his name is Jesus. The very theme of the Gospels in so many places. It was Jesus that took the lowly task. It was Jesus that took the towel, took out his outer garments off, wrapped the towel around his waist. It was not a Jesus that was trying to be a martyr, as so many people today say, oh, they have the basic martyr award coming to them. It was the very fact that this is something that needed to be done, and no one else was going to do it. Obviously, none of the inner group, the ones that he counted on, were willing to take up the basin and wash everybody's feet. Later in life, back in our history, we've had great people. One of those great men was Abraham Lincoln, one of our greatest presidents. And in fact, one of the people, I think that almost everybody could admire a President Lincoln. It is said one time, a story that is related to us, was talking about President Lincoln and a friend were walking along outside of the White House, and they were traveling down a path, and the path was very narrow. And as they rounded the corner, they met a man that was almost running. He was walking so fast, head down, big guy, and he's barreling his way right towards both of them. All of a sudden, our president, President Lincoln, steps to the side, steps off the path, and lets the man go right on through. His friend looks at him, and he replies to the president. He said, sir, you shouldn't have done that. You should have stood your ground and made that guy go around you. I love the fact that we know President Lincoln is someone with very able to think on his feet. His reply was, well, if I'd have stood right there, there would have been a collision. Today we have tons of collisions. We collide on every aspect of our government. We collide on how you get something done. We collide on philosophies, and we collide on everything, it seems like. But the one thing no one is beating each other up to get to is the term that we began with, humility. Obviously, something is lacking. Now, Jesus took the task. He took it upon himself to do it, because he knew if he didn't do it, it would have never been done. It wouldn't have been done at all. Simon Peter wasn't going to do it. James and John, the sons of Zebedee, they weren't going to do it. And that's why after he did those things, he looked at each one of the disciples and he asked the question, know you not what I've done to you? Well, you simply could have said, well, you did this. Well, the answer truly is this. He rendered a service. He did something that no one else was big enough to do themselves. No one was going to humble themselves, take a wash basin, and wash a bunch of dirty disciples' feet. They weren't going to do that for each other. It was probably difficult enough for them to do that for themselves. He was giving them not just the lesson about washing feet, but a lesson in humility. He was speaking to them about a rare jewel that in so many ways has lost its luster in this world today. As great as it is, it's been laid aside as if it's not important. A couple of things for you today. What do you mean by humility, number one? That's something that may be hard to define, because obviously the disciples didn't possess it. They all wanted to be first place. They wanted to be me. It's a me generation. We're a woke generation, whatever that means. That's out of my league. But we woke up to the fact that we're not humble. Maybe that's what we have woke up to. But I know this. We have something. It's not about woke. It's about pride. And I would have to say that's probably the opposite of the humility. That's opposite of what God is looking for. We demand positions. How many of you have ever seen, especially for those of you that have any age on you at all, how hard you had to work to climb the social ladder, how hard you worked to get higher, to take a position. And yet there are those that are just coming out of school today, very young, very energetic. And what do they want? They want a salary greater than yours. They want your position. They think they deserve your position. They have some education. I guess they forgot that you have an education too. It may come out of the school of hard knocks, but it is the education that allows you to do the job that you've been given to do. Maybe it's running a household. Maybe it's running a corporation. I think we all can see those things. But today, we have those that spend a lot of time in self-glorification. All you have to do is look at sports today, if we ever get another chance to see any of them. How great I am. Everybody wants to be like me. They all want to be. Why would they be this? There's very few that you could ever see that has self-contempt. And if they do have that, they see it as humility. They see it as making themselves humble. They might say something about themselves that's very demeaning to themselves, beating themselves up as if that's humility. It's not. It's not humility. It's false humility. Because I'm attracting attention to me. And that's what's important, that you will recognize me. Jesus had an attitude. And if you back up just a little bit in the Word of God, into the 3rd verse of that 13th chapter of the book of John, he says, Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things in his hands, and that he was come from God and went to God, he riseth from supper, laid aside his garments, took a towel, and girded himself. We know that he poured water in a basin. We know that he went and he washed the disciples' feet. He did all of those things right there. Why? It was out of humility. He knew who he was. There was nothing asked, to be questioned about that. He was keenly aware of his divinity. He knew where he had come from. He knew where he was going. He was not a slave in the sense of a spirit. That's not what he had at all. He knew his divine origin. He knew all those things. But what he had was something that other people didn't have around him. He had humility. He had the ability to do something that no one else wanted to do. So, first, humility. It can be a natural thing. It can be something that's inevitable if we ever face the facts about ourselves. If we realize that humility is based on truth. Whereas pride, which we all seem to have a big dose of at times, pride is based on lies. It's always exalting ourselves. It's always saying to the world that I'm something better than I really am. Look what I did. Let me tell you a story about what I accomplished back here. And in reality, maybe they never accomplished anything. Maybe that never took place. It seems like the older we get, sometimes the embellishments of stories get so great, the next thing you know, we could have been the President of the United States. We could have been the pro football player. We could have done all of these great things. We were the supermodel. Or we were doing all these things. But we know the truth. But yet, we don't act upon that same truth. So, if we think about who we're supposed to be as a Christian, we have been remade in the image of God. We are to be a reflection of Jesus Christ. And the great reflection that he has in reproducing him was his humility. Knowing who we were, and then knowing who we are now, we're to take on that divine gift of humility. We're to be like Jesus Christ. You know, it's a shame that we don't live up to our privileges. Think about it. I and you, he and me, these are the same things. He says, I am living within you. But when we don't live up to those privileges, we simply fail the possibilities that God has given us. And there's plenty of possibilities. The very things that he said that want to do. You remember the Apostle Paul, as he would write, he said, I have come short. When you look at his life, how could he have ever come short in anything? He was saying that I haven't accomplished everything that I wanted to do. In fact, all I've been able to do is a very small fraction of the things that I have the ability to do. As great a man as Paul was, he also was humble. He wishes that he could do more for Jesus Christ. So what do we see in humility? Well, I see humility, it's like childlikeness. It's like being a kid. You know, the beauty about having children around, pretty much they're teachable. That is, if they don't spend all their time watching television today that demands that kids are the greatest and that we all should be serving our kids, but they're teachable. They're willing to lean upon you, and they're willing to learn. That's the wondrous things about being a teacher. That brings great joy. They depend upon you. They depend upon all of those that are a little bit older. They've never figured out what it means to be self-sufficient. Oh, it'll come to them soon enough. It'll come to them to want to make their decisions, do what they want to do, eat what they want to eat. All those things come. But real true children, they're not snobs. They love to play with anybody. How do they ever get past that? Well, it's because somebody taught them that that person was inferior. They're not of your class. Oh, they're not of your race. They're not someone that you should associate with. That didn't come from a child. Leave children together. I don't care who it is. They're going to play. They're going to do things together because they're children. They still have a humility about them. They still want to spend time together. So humility very much is childlikeness. But humility also is Christ-likeness. It's the very thing that we should... You remember the statement that Jesus made in Matthew's Gospel in the 11th chapter? He makes a statement to disciples, learn of me, for I am meek and lowly in heart. He's saying something totally opposite of what we're saying today. We're saying today that we want you to learn from me. Well, if you were Christ, you could learn that. But when you have a limited education, a limited knowledge of the universe, a limited fact of who you are, what should we be saying today? Learn of him. Learn of the one that has given you everything for it. We need to forget ourselves. It's not about I and me, me, me. It's about what can we do to serve other people. That, my friends, is humility, just as Jesus showed us in the washing of the disciples' feet. But I want to go on with this. Why would that be a virtue that really is priceless? Why would humility be that? Because I believe that virtue, as Jesus described it in the Sermon on the Mount, is the very door to the kingdom of heaven. Do you remember what he wrote in Matthew's Gospel in the 5th chapter, the beginning of the Sermon on the Mount, at verse number 3? He says, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. You remember later he would describe a situation where they talked about, it's found over in Luke's Gospel in the 18th chapter. It talks about two men going up to the temple to pray. One happened to be a Pharisee, one happened to be a publican. And a publican simply meaning a very common sinner. That's the way that all the religious people looked upon that. So I guess we all would fall into the publican side of everything. But they went up to pray. And remember exactly what took place. I always wanted to ask the question, who won this prayer life? Who was the one to spend the time to do that? And I realized, as the word says, the Pharisee patted himself on the back. The Pharisee looked down on the publican. You remember what the Pharisee said? I'm so thankful that I'm not like this sorry individual over here. That I do all of these great and wonderful things. He saw himself as superior. But the one area that he could not say that he was superior. Oh, he said he was upright, and I do not deny that. He said, oh, he was decent. I'm sure that he was decent to his family. He said that he was a tither, that he gave his money. Well, I don't doubt that either. If you're a Pharisee, you had to tithe. It was going to be. But the one thing he could not do, nor could he ever compare to, he lacked humility. Look at me. I'm so great. I'm so wondrous. I've got the clothes. He's got the rags. I am a Pharisee. He's a sinner, a sorry individual. How is it the publican won that? How is that we know from what Jesus said who really came out triumphant? It's because within that publican, he realized who he wasn't. He wasn't righteous. He wasn't all those things. He had not arrived at spiritual attainment. He said, have mercy upon me. He saw himself in humility. He was undone before God. Whereas sometimes the righteous people always see themselves as something better, when in reality they're anything but better. They're not what we should be. It's what we think we are in our minds, and what we come across as holier than thou, and what turns people away. So we have humility. I think one of the most humbling things in my life that I can reach back to right now had to be as a teacher. It came to me in the first year that I taught in the public school system. I came to one of the great institutions. I know I live in the Robinson area now, but I was actually at Midway at the time. And I learned something. After teaching a couple years at Baylor, I had come to this school. I wanted to get a certification that I could teach in the public schools in the secondary level. And so I did. I went back to do student teaching. Now, I'd already been teaching on a much higher level than what I was doing now. I'll never forget giving the first test after I had poured myself into the very teaching of the subject perfectly. I thought I'd given these young men and women all the information that they'd need, that they readily would grip this, and that they could come back and give me back the answers, and it would be perfect. Unfortunately for me, everybody failed. Yes, nobody passed the test. Not at all. And I had some very smart kids that turned out to be very, very high academically, but they failed my test. But who really failed? Me. I failed. My pride was to give them something that was beyond their capabilities to learn at that time. My pride said, recognize me, look at me, I'm special. I came from Baylor, I'm doing this. I've humbled myself to come and teach you, poor kids. The reality was, I was the one that didn't have the right answer. I was the one that never really understood that I need to break it down and put it on their level. But I learned something else out of that. I learned that students could be anything they wanted to be. Something that sometimes that I was pressed as a student myself in school, that I was going to be relegated to that crowd that didn't go to college, that didn't do anything. I found out also that there were a few, not many, but a few. They were the students that were the hardest to teach because they always knew the answer. It's not because they really knew the answer, but they thought they always knew the answer. And they became very difficult to teach. Give me the kid that was didn't have the answer, probably didn't study enough either, but there was within them the ability to find that out. They could find the answer. I learned also later, as I transitioned from being a teacher, which was a great blessing, one of the greatest callings ever, into business, that I could learn from anybody. It didn't have to be somebody that had been in business a long time. It didn't have to be somebody very special or prominent in our society, prominent in Waco. I didn't have that. I could learn from anybody. I could pick up something new and different from anybody. So I think that had to come in the term humility. Have I perfected it? No, not by any shades. Pride always wants to well up. Pride always wants to say something. But I did learn what I think is very true. The door to all worthwhile kingdoms comes, and it's called humility. I think it's something that we all ought to get. So, what is humility? I can tell you this, it's something that I think is very essential to our happiness. I think it's something that we ought to be. Some people are they're so proud of their pride. And there are some that are so proud of being humble. But they both missed the goal. They both missed their aim is off. It's nothing like having to be told that I'm so proud that I'm poor. They don't have anything. In reality, I'm saying, look at me, I am something. And when I'm really not anything, how long will we stand upon our own dignity? Our eternity depends upon someone that gave us everything. It does not stand upon us. How often will we stand back and say, I did this, look at my good life? If it were not for the grace and the mercy of a loving Father, we would all be hell-bound. But God chose us to make us what we should be in this world today. And it's not about my recognition, it's about recognizing Him. It's not about my dignity, it's about recognizing His dignity. It's about recognizing who He is. It's not about me receiving honor, it's about me honoring Him. It's about me living a life for Him. You see, humility is essential. It's one of the most essential and useful things that anyone can have in their lives today. The ability to serve, whether it's cleaning a bathroom, whether it's taking plants or picking weeds out of our flower beds, or maybe it's going down and being part of the volunteer group at the food pantry. You see, that's where God rewards. You may not get the praise. You may not get the pat on the back. You certainly deserve it. But God sees every bit of that. And He misses none of those kind of things. It's the humility, His ability to serve unconditionally. Without recognition. Without anything else. I serve because I just like to serve. I want to serve you. Humility is having the right attitude. An attitude that I'm not doing something that you need to pay attention to. I'm doing something that I don't want you to pay attention to, but it's still going to get done. It's going to be taken care of. Humility is a ministry. Maybe it's a ministry to those that are less fortunate, but maybe it's a ministry to teach those that think there's something, that there's only one that deserves the recognition that we're willing to give. That's what humility always is for me. We have a great saying today, we're all in this together. And in so many ways we are all in this together. This virus has brought that very much. But being all together, we need one to lead. We need one person to stand up and remind us, I'm in control. I have this under control. And I'm not talking about our president or our governor or the mayor of our city. I'm talking about our God. He has all of this in control. He knows all the plight. He knows everything there is to know. So my attitude should be right towards my God. I should be praising him. He's given me an opportunity to go through something I've never gone through before, and I have the opportunity to learn something. You see, service is trusting in someone greater than yourself. It's trusting that I'm not self-sufficient. I need someone, and his name is Jesus. Because if I went to serve you and I did it in myself, I would do it all alone. You don't need me, you need Christ. You need him. A humble man is a man that sees his strength is in the Almighty. That's what a humble man is. That's our strength. And with that strength, any test can come our way, because I'm not relying on me, I'm relying on him. As I like to say, Lord, not my problem, it's your problem. Because it is. And he's willing to take it on and utilize us if we are humble. Jesus left this world, but he reminded us before he ever took off, before he ever ascended into heaven again, before he had ever promised other things, he said, Lo, I am with you always, even unto the end of the world. We haven't got to the end of this world yet, even though many of us think that might be somewhere we're heading soon. I know this, Jesus is with us always, and he will take care of us. Humble enough to wash our feet, great enough to die for us and save our souls, and then give us every good and perfect gift that comes from above. And I praise him for it.